May 1972, Universal Studios, Burbank. Clint Eastwood walks into a conference room holding a script nobody wants to make. The executives are nervous. Clint is their biggest star, but what he is proposing terrifies them. A Western where the hero might be the devil. A town painted red. A story with no redemption, no hope, only vengeance. They tell him it will destroy his career. He makes it anyway. And in doing so, he creates something that will haunt audiences for decades. A film that fails at the box office gets destroyed by critics and becomes one of the most influential cult classics in cinema history. To understand how High Plains Drifter became a cult phenomenon, you need to understand who Clint Eastwood was in 1972. He is 42 years old. He has conquered the Western genre with Sergio Leone. He has become Dirty Harry. He is the biggest box office draw in America. Studios will give him anything he wants: money, control, final cut. But what Clint wants is something they cannot comprehend. He wants to make a film that questions everything the Western stands for. Every myth, every hero, every comfortable lie America tells itself about the Old West. Clint has been thinking about this story for years. It came to him while making the Dollars trilogy with Leone. All those nameless gunfighters, all those violent men who ride into town, solve problems with bullets, and disappear. What if one of those men was not a savior? What if he was something darker? What if he was a ghost, a demon, an instrument of cosmic justice? What if the town he saved did not deserve saving? The script is written by Ernest Tidyman, the man who wrote The French Connection. It is called High Plains Drifter. The premise is simple. A stranger rides into a mining town called Lago. The townspeople are terrified of three outlaws who are about to be released from prison. They hire the stranger to protect them. But the stranger is not interested in protection. He is interested in punishment, because the town has a secret. Years ago, they stood by while their marshal was whipped to death in the street. They did nothing. They watched. And now someone has come back to make them pay. Clint reads the script and sees something the studio does not. This is not a Western. This is a morality play, a ghost story, a meditation on guilt and complicity. It is everything the Western genre usually avoids: ambiguity, moral darkness, the possibility that there are no heroes, only people making choices and living with consequences. When Clint pitches the film to Universal, their response is immediate and panicked. The head of production, a man named Ned Tannen, speaks first. His voice is careful, diplomatic. "Clint, we love you. You know that. But this script, it is too dark. The hero rapes a woman. He humiliates the townspeople. He paints an entire town red and renames it Hell. Audiences will hate this. They want heroes. They want justice. They want to feel good when they leave the theater." Clint listens. His face is calm. When Tannen finishes, Clint speaks quietly. What if they are wrong to want that? What if the Western has been lying to them for 70 years? What if there were no heroes in the Old West, only survivors? Another executive leans forward. "Clint, you're the biggest star in the world right now. You can make any film you want. Why make something that will alienate your audience? Why risk everything on a film that nobody asked for? Because nobody asked for it. That is exactly why it matters." The room goes silent. The executives look at each other. They know they cannot stop him. Clint has too much power, too much leverage. If they refuse to make this film, he will go to another studio. So they make a deal. Small budget, complete creative control, and Clint directs. It is only his second film as a director. His first was Play Misty for Me, a psychological thriller that proved he could handle a camera. But this is different. This is personal. Production begins in June 1972. They are shooting at Mono Lake in California, a desolate, otherworldly location that looks like the surface of an alien planet. The salt formations, the dead trees, the eerie silence. It is perfect for what Clint wants to create. A town that exists outside of time, outside of morality, outside of salvation. The cast is small. Clint plays the stranger. He has no name, no backstory, no explanation. He simply appears. Verna Bloom plays the woman he rapes in the barn. It is the most controversial scene in the film, morally indefensible, artistically essential. Mitchell Ryan plays the brutal outlaw leader. The townspeople are played by character actors who bring a nervous energy to every scene. They know they are guilty. They know punishment is coming. On the first day of shooting, Clint gathers the cast. He does not give them a pep talk. He does not explain his vision. He simply says this: "This is not a Western. Do not play it like a Western. Play it like a nightmare, like something that feels real, even though you know it cannot be." The actors look at him, uncertain. One of them asks, "Who is the stranger? Is he a ghost? Is he the marshal come back from the dead?" Clint smiles slightly. "I do not know, and neither should you. Play the uncertainty. Play the fear of not knowing." As filming continues, something strange happens on set. The atmosphere becomes oppressive. The heat at Mono Lake is crushing. The salt formations reflect the sun, creating a blinding glare. The crew is exhausted. The actors are on edge, and Clint does nothing to ease the tension. He wants it. He needs it. The discomfort, the unease, the feeling that something is wrong. It bleeds into every frame. They are filming the scene where the stranger paints the town red. It is the turning point of the film, the moment where metaphor becomes literal. The townspeople watch in horror as their entire world turns the color of blood, the color of guilt. The scene requires dozens of extras painting buildings in complete silence. No music, no dialogue, just the sound of brushes on wood. Clint calls action. The extras begin painting. But something is missing. They are going through the motions, but they do not look haunted. They look like extras on a film set. Clint calls cut. He walks over to the group. His voice is low. "You are not painting a town. You are covering up a murder. Every stroke of that brush is an attempt to hide what you did. You are trying to erase your guilt, but you know it will not work. You know nothing can wash this away." The extras nod. They reset. Clint calls action again. This time, it is different. The way they move, the way they avoid each other's eyes, the way their hands shake slightly. They look like people trying to bury a body, and it is devastating. The rape scene is filmed on day 18. Clint knows this will be the scene that defines how people see the film. If it feels gratuitous, if it feels exploitative, the entire movie collapses. But if it feels like what it is, a manifestation of the town's sins, a reversal of their passivity, then it becomes something else, something necessary and ugly. Verna Bloom is terrified, not of Clint, but of the scene itself. She knows it will be uncomfortable. She knows people will hate it. Before they film, Clint pulls her aside. They sit on the steps of the barn set. Clint speaks quietly. "I need you to know something. This scene is not about sex. It is about power. It is about a town that stood by while a man was murdered, and now they are experiencing what it feels like to be powerless. Your character is not a victim in the traditional sense. She is complicit. She watched the marshal die, and now she is confronting what that complicity costs." Verna looks at him. "So I am being punished. We are all being punished." That is the point of the film. They film the scene in one take. Clint does not want to drag it out, does not want to make Verna repeat it multiple times. It is brutal, uncomfortable, morally complex. And it works because it refuses to be anything other than what it is. An act of violence that cannot be justified, only understood as part of a larger pattern of violence. When filming wraps in August, Clint has 87 minutes of footage. He edits it himself, cutting ruthlessly. No fat, no explanation, no comfort. The final cut is exactly what he envisioned. A film that refuses to explain itself, refuses to apologize, refuses to make the audience feel good. Universal screens the film for test audiences in October 1972. The reaction is catastrophic. People walk out. Comment cards are brutal. Too dark, too violent, too confusing. Who is the stranger? Why does he do these things? Why should we care about any of these people? Ned Tannen calls Clint the next morning. His voice is tight. Clint, the test screenings were a disaster. We need to reshoot. We need to add narration explaining who the stranger is. We need to soften the rape scene. We need to give the audience something to hold on to. Clint listens. Then he says, "No." Ned is silent for a moment. "Clint, this film is going to fail. Nobody wants to see this. We are going to lose money. You are going to damage your career. Then I will damage my career." They released the film in April 1973. The reviews are savage. Variety calls it a cynical, unpleasant exercise in nihilism. The New York Times writes that Eastwood has confused ambiguity with profundity. Audiences stay away. The film makes $15 million against a $5 million budget. A modest success financially, a complete failure creatively in the eyes of critics and the studio. But something strange happens in the years that follow. The film does not disappear. It plays on late-night television. It shows up at revival theaters. College students discover it. Film students dissect it. And slowly, quietly, it begins to accumulate a following. Not a mainstream audience, but something deeper. A cult. By the early 1980s, High Plains Drifter is being taught in film schools. Students write papers on its use of color, its deconstruction of the Western hero, its exploration of collective guilt. Directors cite it as an influence. Sam Raimi watches it before making The Quick and the Dead. The Coen brothers reference it in No Country for Old Men. Quentin Tarantino calls it one of the greatest westerns ever made. What happened? How did a film that critics hated and audiences ignored become a cult classic? The answer is simple. It refused to compromise. It refused to give people what they wanted. It refused to be anything other than what it was. And in doing so, it became timeless. Because trends change, tastes evolve, but honesty endures. A film that tells an uncomfortable truth will always find an audience, even if it takes decades. In 1985, a journalist asks Clint about High Plains Drifter. "Why do you think it failed when it was released but succeeded later?" Clint thinks for a moment. Then he says, "It did not fail. It just took time for people to catch up." In 1973, audiences wanted heroes. They wanted simple morality. They wanted to feel good. But the world does not work that way. And eventually, people realize that. They start looking for films that tell the truth, even when the truth is ugly. That is when they find High Plains Drifter. But do you regret making it? Do you wish you had listened to the studio and made it more accessible? Clint looks at him like the question is absurd. Why would I regret telling the truth? That is the essence of a cult classic. It is not a film that everyone loves. It is a film that some people need. It is not about mass appeal. It is about connection, about finding the people who understand what you are trying to say, even if there are only a few thousand of them, even if it takes 10 years for them to find you. High Plains Drifter did not become a cult classic because it was marketed correctly or because it had a clever release strategy. It became a cult classic because it was uncompromising. Because Clint Eastwood made exactly the film he wanted to make, regardless of what the studio wanted, what the critics wanted, what the audience wanted. He trusted that somewhere, sometime, people would understand. And he was right. Today, High Plains Drifter is considered one of the greatest westerns ever made. It is studied in universities. It is referenced by filmmakers. It plays at repertory theaters to sold-out crowds. The scene where the town is painted red is iconic. The ambiguous ending, where the stranger rides away and a grave marker is revealed bearing the marshal's name, is debated endlessly. Is he a ghost? Is he supernatural? Is he just a man who looks like the marshal? Clint has never answered that question. And that is why the film endures. Because it trusts the audience to think, to interpret, to engage. It does not spoon-feed. It does not explain. It simply presents. And in that presentation, it creates space for each viewer to bring their own understanding, their own interpretation, their own truth. Years later, film students ask Clint how to make a cult classic. How do you create something that lasts beyond its initial release? Clint's answer is always the same. You do not try to make a cult classic. You try to make something honest, something that matters to you, something you believe in, even if nobody else does. If you compromise, if you try to please everyone, you will please no one. But if you commit, if you go all the way, if you refuse to blink, then maybe, years later, someone will find your film, and it will mean something to them. That is all you can hope for. In 1972, Clint Eastwood walked into a conference room and told executives he was making a film nobody wanted. They told him it would destroy his career. They told him audiences would hate it. They told him to play it safe. And he said no. Because some stories are worth the risk, some truths are worth telling, even if they make people uncomfortable, even if they fail at the box office, even if critics tear them apart. High Plains Drifter failed in 1973, but it succeeded in 1983, and 1993, and 2003, and it will succeed in 2033. Because cult classics do not die. They wait. They find their audience slowly, patiently, inevitably. They do not need marketing campaigns or wide releases. They just need to be honest. They need to refuse to compromise. They need to trust that somewhere, someone is looking for exactly what they have to offer. That is Clint Eastwood's legacy. Not the box office numbers, not the awards, not the fame. The willingness to make films that nobody asked for. The courage to trust his vision even when everyone told him he was wrong. The understanding that great art is not about pleasing the masses. It is about telling the truth and waiting for the people who need that truth to find it. On a soundstage in 1972, Clint Eastwood made a film about a town that painted itself red to hide its guilt. He made it his way, without compromise, without apology. The studio hated it. Critics destroyed it. Audiences ignored it. And 50 years later, it is considered a masterpiece, a cult classic, a film that changed the Western genre forever. That is how a film becomes a cult classic. Not through marketing or manipulation, through honesty, through commitment, through the stubborn belief that truth matters more than approval, through the willingness to fail spectacularly in service of something larger than yourself. Clint Eastwood did not set out to make a cult classic. He set out to make a film that mattered to him. And in doing so, he created something that will matter to people forever. Not all people, just the right people. The ones who understand that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones nobody wants to hear. Until suddenly, decades later, they are the only stories worth listening to. That is the Eastwood example. Silent, stubborn, uncompromising, trusting the truth more than the market, believing in the audience even when the audience does not believe in the film, making art for the people who will find it 10, 20, 50 years later, making films that do not chase trends but create them, that do not follow the rules but rewrite them. In that conference room in 1972, when executives told Clint to play it safe, he could have listened. He could have made a conventional Western. He could have protected his career. But he did not, because some films are worth the risk. Some stories demand to be told even if nobody wants to hear them, even if they fail, even if they take decades to find their audience. High Plains Drifter found its audience, and in finding it, it proved something essential about art, about film, about the difference between success and significance. Success is immediate. Significance takes time. Success is measured in box office receipts. Significance is measured in influence, in impact, in the way a film changes how people see the world. Clint Eastwood chose significance, and 50 years later, we are still talking about it, still watching it, still trying to understand what it means. That is a cult classic. That is the Eastwood example. That is what happens when you refuse to compromise. If this resonated with you, there are more stories like this waiting. Stories about artists who chose truth over comfort, significance over success, legacy over approval. Subscribe and discover the quiet moments that changed cinema forever.